In March 2012, the body of 28-year-old Rachel Barnes was discovered during renovations at Faithstone Ministries in Canyon, Texas. An investigation uncovered the horrifying double life of Reverend Samuel Grayson, a beloved preacher with a history of manipulation and murder. In April 2010, Grayson's relationship with music teacher Emily Parker marked the beginning of a chain of events that would lead to a shocking and bloody revelation. The Texas evening was warm, the kind of dry heat that clung to your skin. At a dimly lit gas station just outside Canyon, a woman stumbled in, barefoot and shaking. She was covered in dirt, her face streaked with tears, and her trembling hands clutched a cracked phone as if it were the only thing keeping her alive. Her name was Emily Parker, a 35-year-old music teacher whose calm and structured life had been torn apart just hours earlier. Emily was known in the small town of Canyon for her gentle demeanor and passion for teaching. She worked at the local elementary school and was beloved by her students, who often left her thank you notes after class. Emily's life, though, had not been easy. In 2009, her husband left her, citing irreconcilable differences. It wasn't the divorce that shattered Emily. It was the loneliness that followed. She poured herself into her work, but by 2010, she found herself searching for solace. That's when she began attending Faithstone Ministries. Faithstone was a cornerstone of the Canyon community. Its leader, Reverend Samuel Grayson, was not just a preacher. He was a man of great influence. Grayson had the kind of charisma that could make anyone believe they were the center of his world. His sermons were powerful, often punctuated by his booming voice and commanding presence. But it wasn't just his preaching that drew people in. It was his kindness. He had a way of making everyone feel seen, and Emily was no exception. Emily first met Reverend Grayson after a Sunday service in the early 2011. She was sitting in the last pew, nervously clutching her hymnal, when he approached her. He offered her counseling, telling her it was his mission to help people in their times of need. For months, Emily attended one-on-one sessions with Grayson. At first, the meetings were innocent. He listened as she poured out her pain about her divorce and her struggles with self-worth. But over time, the nature of their sessions changed. Grayson began to show a side of himself that felt less pastoral and more personal. Emily didn't realize it then, but she was not the only woman receiving this kind of attention. Born in 1968, Samuel Grayson was raised in Canyon, Texas, the only child of Pastor William Grayson and his wife Eleanor. Samuel grew up surrounded by the rituals of the church, attending every service and absorbing his father's teachings. By 1986, Samuel had taken on leadership roles within Faithstone Ministries, often delivering sermons when his father was unwell. His father's death in 1992 left a void in the congregation, one that Samuel eagerly stepped in to fill. Under his leadership, Faithstone grew from a modest local church to a regional powerhouse. By the early 2000s, the church had over 1,000 members, a polished website, and regular appearances on local TV. To outsiders, Grayson was a man of faith, a widower raising his teenage daughter after his wife's death from cancer in 2005. But those close to him whispered about a darker side. Neighbors often commented on Grayson's strict demeanor. He rarely smiled off camera, and his relationships with women in the congregation raised eyebrows. Over the years, several women came forward to confide in each other about their unease. They spoke of Grayson's charm turning into control, of how he would insert himself into their personal lives under the guise of counseling. Grayson's sermons frequently focused on redemption, but his actions suggested he saw himself as more than just a guide. He had a pattern of targeting vulnerable women, those who had recently lost loved ones, gone through divorces, or experienced financial struggles. He would offer them help, a listening ear, and eventually a place within his inner circle. One of those women was Rachel Barnes. Rachel was 28 years old, a single mother struggling to make ends meet after her husband left her in 2008. She had joined Faithstone Ministries in 2009, seeking support for her young son, Caleb. Rachel worked long hours as a waitress at a diner on Canyon's main street, often taking double shifts to pay for Caleb's daycare. Despite her hardships, Rachel was known for her warmth. She greeted every customer with a smile and never complained, even when her feet ached from hours of standing. By 2010, Rachel had become a regular attendee at Faithstone. Reverend Grayson quickly took notice of her. He would often single her out during services, asking the congregation to pray for her strength as a single mother. At first, Rachel was grateful. She felt seen, valued even, in a way she hadn't since her husband left. But as the months went on, Grayson's attention became more personal. He began visiting her at the diner, offering to pray with her during her breaks. He even gifted her Caleb's first tricycle, a gesture that Rachel found both kind and overwhelming. Emily Parker had been invited to Reverend Grayson's home for what he described as a quiet dinner to discuss a new charity initiative. She had been to his home before, a modest yet stately house on the outskirts of Canyon. But that evening, something felt different. The house was unusually dark, the air thick with tension. Emily noticed Rachel's car parked in the driveway and felt a pang of jealousy, though she couldn't explain why. Inside, Grayson greeted her warmly, but quickly excused himself, saying he needed to finish a private session in his study. He instructed Emily to wait in the living room, where the only sounds were the ticking of a grandfather clock and the muffled voices coming from down the hall. Curiosity got the better of her. Emily tiptoed toward the study and pressed her ear to the door. What she heard froze her in place. Rachel's voice, trembling, pleaded for Grayson to let her leave. His voice, calm but menacing, responded with words Emily couldn't make out. Then came a sudden crash, followed by a muffled scream. Emily's heart raced. She leaned closer, her hand trembling as she turned on the recording app on her phone. Through the crack of the door, she saw Grayson standing over Rachel, a knife in his hand. Blood pooled beneath Rachel as she gasped for breath. Emily's instincts screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to stay silent long enough to record the evidence she knew she would need. As soon as Grayson turned away, Emily bolted. She ran through the house, out the side door, and into the night. The uneven ground cut her feet, but she didn't stop. By the time she reached the gas station 3 miles away, her body was shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. Her only lifeline was the recording on her phone and the hope that someone would believe her story. Emily Parker was not the kind of person you'd expect to find entangled in a secretive relationship with a man like Reverend Samuel Grayson. At 35, Emily was a respected music teacher in Canyon, Texas, loved for her quiet strength and dedication to her students. But by 2010, her life had taken a sharp turn. The divorce from her husband had left her not only emotionally fragile, but also deeply lonely. She sought solace in Faithstone Ministries, drawn to its reputation as a haven for those in need. Reverend Grayson had a way of finding people when they were at their lowest. He had a presence that was both commanding and comforting, a combination that made it easy for people like Emily to trust him. During their first counseling session, Emily opened up about her feelings of failure and hopelessness. Grayson had listened intently, his gaze steady, and assured her that pain was a temporary test of faith. His words felt like an anchor in the storm of her emotions. Over the next few months, their sessions became more frequent. Grayson made her feel special, always finding time for her, even when the demands of the church seemed overwhelming. He spoke about the burden of leadership and how only a few people could understand the pressure he faced. Emily felt a connection growing between them, one that blurred the lines between spiritual guidance and something more intimate. By the late 2010, their relationship had crossed that line. At first, Emily told herself it was love. Grayson was charming and attentive, making her feel seen in a way she hadn't for years. But as their affair deepened, cracks began to show in his carefully crafted facade. He started to question her every move, growing jealous when she spent time with friends or mentioned casual conversations with male colleagues. He called it protective concern, but Emily felt the weight of his control tightening around her life. Still, she convinced herself that his intensity was a sign of his love. Unbeknownst to Emily, Grayson had another side she was only beginning to glimpse. While Emily was falling deeper into Grayson's orbit, another woman was being drawn in. Rachel Barnes, 28, was a single mother working tirelessly to support her young son, Caleb. Her struggles with childcare, long hours as a waitress, and financial instability made her vulnerable. She had been attending Faithstone Ministries since 2009, seeking hope in her faith. Grayson noticed her immediately. By 2011, Rachel had become a regular fixture at Grayson's private counseling sessions. To the congregation, her relationship with him seemed like that of a mentor and a mentee. But Emily began to notice subtle changes. She saw how Grayson's eyes lingered on Rachel during services, and how Rachel, once a reserved woman, seemed more withdrawn after their meetings. Emily started to feel uneasy, but dismissed her feelings as jealousy. It wasn't until early 2012 that Emily began to piece things together. Grayson's behavior had grown more erratic. He became more secretive, often disappearing for hours without explanation. When Emily questioned him, he would deflect, accusing her of mistrust. Determined to understand what was happening, Emily started keeping a journal. She noted the times Grayson mentioned Rachel, the overlaps in their schedules, and the cryptic remarks he made about helping those who need saving. Emily arrived at Grayson's home that evening expecting a quiet dinner. He had described it as a chance for them to reconnect after what he called the distractions of recent weeks. But the moment she stepped through the door, she sensed something was wrong. The house, usually filled with the sound of soft gospel music or the hum of activity, was silent. Even the air felt heavy, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Grayson greeted her at the door, his smile unusually tight. He mentioned a private spiritual session he was conducting in his study and asked Emily to wait in the living room. His tone was calm, almost casual, but something about his demeanor unsettled her. As he disappeared down the hall, she noticed his shirt cuff was stained, a small smudge of what looked like blood. Emily sat on the edge of the couch, her heart pounding. She tried to focus on the ornate decor of the room, the framed scripture verses and polished wooden crosses, but her unease grew with each passing minute. From down the hall, she heard muffled voices. One was Grayson's, his tone low and deliberate. The other was a woman's, Rachel's. Her voice was shaky, tinged with fear. Compelled by a mix of curiosity and dread, Emily rose from the couch. She walked quietly toward the study, her bare feet making no sound on the hardwood floor. As she approached the door, the voices grew clearer. Rachel was pleading, her words coming out in bursts of desperation. Grayson's replies were calm, almost soothing, but there was a sharpness beneath the surface that made Emily's stomach twist. Through the small gap in the door, Emily saw the scene unfold. Rachel was on her knees, her hands clasped as if in prayer. Grayson stood over her, his face expressionless, a knife glinting in his hand. Emily froze, her breath caught in her throat. Grayson moved swiftly, bringing the knife down in a blur of motion. Rachel's screams were muffled as he covered her mouth with his free hand. Emily wanted to scream, to run, but her body refused to move. Her mind raced with thoughts of what to do. She fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She managed to activate the recording app, capturing the sounds of Rachel's muffled cries and Grayson's chilling words. When Rachel fell silent, Emily knew she couldn't stay. She turned and ran, her feet barely touching the ground as she bolted through the side door. The cool night air hit her like a shock, but she didn't stop. She ran through the darkness, her bare feet scraping against gravel and sharp twigs. Every sound behind her felt like Grayson's footsteps, chasing her down. When Emily finally reached the gas station 3 miles away, her legs gave out beneath her. The clerk, startled by her appearance, rushed to help. Emily thrust her phone at him, her voice barely a whisper, as she tried to explain what had happened. The police arrived within minutes, their flashing lights illuminating her bloodied hands and tear-streaked face. March 7th, 2012, the Canyon Sheriff's Department, prompted by Emily Parker's frantic testimony and her recording, dispatched officers to Reverend Samuel Grayson's home early that morning. The house stood calm and unassuming, its modest facade betraying nothing of the horrors Emily claimed had occurred inside. Grayson himself greeted the officers at the door, his demeanor unshaken. He was dressed neatly, his hair combed back, and his voice carried a practiced calmness. The officers requested to inspect the property. Grayson stepped aside, inviting them in with an air of confidence that unnerved even the most seasoned deputies. He spoke with a measured tone, denying all allegations and insisting that Rachel Barnes had left for a spiritual retreat the previous evening. He even presented a series of text messages from Rachel's phone, seemingly corroborating his story. These texts painted a picture of a woman seeking solitude and clarity, asking for prayers during her absence. Inside the house, the study that Emily had described in vivid detail appeared pristine. There was no sign of a struggle, no blood, no misplaced furniture. The thick wooden desk was spotless, and the faint scent of lemon polish lingered in the air. Grayson explained away Emily's claims as the delusions of a bitter former lover, suggesting that her emotions had clouded her judgment. His confidence was disarming, and for a moment, even the officers doubted the severity of Emily's accusations. Emily's credibility came under scrutiny. The deputies noted her admitted affair with Grayson, a detail Grayson emphasized during questioning. To an outsider, her story could easily appear as a desperate attempt to smear the reputation of a beloved community leader. However, the recording on Emily's phone kept the investigation alive. While the audio was muffled and incomplete, it captured Rachel's panicked voice and Grayson's cold, chilling tone. The sheriff's department could not dismiss the case outright. March 8, 2012. The investigation stalled almost immediately. A thorough search of Grayson's home yielded no evidence to support Emily's claims. Forensic teams combed the property for days, focusing on the study where the alleged attack occurred. But the room was meticulously clean. Not a single trace of blood or physical struggle was found. Grayson's composure during these searches only bolstered his defense. He cooperated fully, offering access to every corner of his home and maintaining a calm, righteous facade. Meanwhile, Grayson's influence over the community came into full force. Faithstone Ministries became a hub of support for the preacher. Congregants rallied around him, organizing prayer vigils and flooding social media with posts defending his character. They described him as a man of unwavering faith, someone who had guided their families through crises and inspired them with his sermons. To these loyal followers, Emily Parker was an outsider, an unstable woman trying to destroy a good man's reputation. Emily faced a harsh backlash. Church members whispered about her in grocery store aisles, and her once friendly neighbors turned cold. Parents at the school where she taught questioned her ability to be a role model for their children. Emily's world began to crumble under the weight of public scrutiny. She had risked everything by coming forward, yet the very community she sought to protect had turned against her. Despite the isolation and fear, Emily clung to the hope that justice would prevail. Unbeknownst to the investigators, Grayson had secrets hidden in the depths of his home. Beneath the foundation, concealed behind a reinforced trapdoor in the basement, lay a hidden room. The room was a macabre vault of Grayson's darkest secrets. Quicklime barrels sat in one corner, evidence of his methodical approach to disposing of his victims. The walls were lined with shelves containing letters, jewelry, and personal items belonging to women who had disappeared over the years. Polaroid photographs documenting his crimes were carefully organized and stored in a locked chest. Rachel's body had been dealt with swiftly. Grayson, knowing the risks of being caught, had used the quicklime to destroy any trace of her remains. He had spent the night meticulously cleaning the study and crafting his alibi. His years of manipulation and careful planning had prepared him for moments like this. The facade he wore in public was unshakable, and his hidden crimes were buried so deeply that even the most diligent investigators had no reason to suspect them. March 20th, 2012. The investigation took an unexpected turn when a construction crew working on renovations at Faithstone Ministries stumbled upon human remains buried beneath the church's foundation. The discovery was accidental. The workers had been digging to reinforce the building's structural integrity when they uncovered a shallow grave. Dental records confirmed the remains belonged to Patricia Lane, a woman who had disappeared in the 2007 after attending one of Grayson's women's retreats. Patricia's disappearance had been a mystery for years. She was a bright and ambitious 32-year-old who had joined Faithstone Ministries, seeking guidance during a difficult time in her life. Her sudden vanishing had left her family devastated and baffled. At the time, authorities had no evidence to link her to foul play, and the case went cold. The discovery of her remains shattered the illusion of Faithstone as a sanctuary of hope. The discovery opened a floodgate of questions. Investigators began to re-examine other missing persons cases connected to the church. Financial records from Faithstone Ministries revealed large cash withdrawals and unreported donations spanning over a decade. These funds, investigators suspected, were used to fund Grayson's lavish lifestyle and to cover up his crimes. Grayson's carefully maintained image began to crack as the evidence against him grew. The community, once so steadfast in its support of Grayson, began to waver. Doubt spread like wildfire as people questioned the man they had revered for years. Emily Parker, though still ostracized by many, felt a glimmer of vindication as the truth about Grayson's sinister activities began to surface. The discovery of Patricia Lane's remains marked the beginning of Grayson's downfall. For years, he had managed to stay ahead of suspicion, hiding his crimes behind his position of power. But the unearthing of Patricia's grave was a chilling reminder that no secret could stay buried forever. Investigators were now closer than ever to uncovering the full extent of his monstrous deeds. April 5th, 2012. It was a bright Sunday morning, and the congregation at Faithstone Ministries gathered as they did every week. Families filled the pews, exchanging warm greetings and smiles, their Bibles clutched tightly as they prepared to hear another powerful sermon from Reverend Samuel Grayson. The choir sang hymns that echoed through the sanctuary, and sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the floor. For many, this was a sacred ritual, a moment of peace in their busy lives. Grayson stood at the pulpit, commanding attention with his usual calm authority. He wore his signature black suit and carried the same worn Bible he had preached from for years. His voice, steady and reassuring, filled the room as he began his sermon. The congregation hung on his every word, unaware of the storm brewing just outside the church doors. At 10:45 a.m., the double doors of the sanctuary burst open. The sound of boots against the tiled floor echoed through the room, silencing the congregation mid-hymn. Members of the Canyon Sheriff's Department entered, led by Detective Mark Caldwell, a no-nonsense investigator who had spent weeks piecing together Grayson's crimes. The congregation gasped as the officers walked purposefully down the aisle toward the pulpit. Grayson did not flinch. He closed his Bible with a deliberate calm, his expression serene, as if he had been expecting this moment. The officers announced the charges: multiple counts of murder, abuse, and embezzlement. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the pews as parishioners struggled to process what they were hearing. Some began to cry, clutching one another for support, while others stared in stunned silence. Grayson raised his hands, allowing the deputies to handcuff him without resistance. His eyes scanned the room, his calm demeanor unnerving as he maintained a faint smile. As the officers escorted him down the aisle, Grayson turned to the reporters gathered outside the church. Flashbulbs lit up the scene as cameras captured every moment. He spoke briefly, declaring his innocence and insisting that he was being persecuted. His words sent a chill through those watching. To his most loyal followers, this was a test of faith. To others, it was the first crack in the image of the man they once revered. The moment was surreal for Emily Parker, who watched the events unfold from a safe distance. She had fought tirelessly to bring Grayson to justice, and now, seeing him in handcuffs, she felt a complex mix of relief, anger, and lingering fear. It was a victory, but it came at a cost. The trial of Reverend Samuel Grayson began on August 12, 2012, in the Canyon County Courthouse. The case had drawn national attention, with media outlets dubbing him the pulpit predator. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse daily, holding signs that ranged from messages of support to demands for justice. For weeks, the community had been split between those who believed in Grayson's innocence and those who were horrified by the revelations of his crimes. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Linda Harper, meticulously laid out the evidence. Harper, a seasoned attorney known for her sharp wit and determination, began by introducing the chilling discovery of Patricia Lane's remains beneath the church foundation. Dental records and forensic analysis left no doubt about the identity of the victim, linking her death directly to Grayson. Harper then presented Emily Parker's audio recordings, the most damning pieces of evidence in the case. The courtroom listened in silence as the muffled sounds of Rachel Barnes's desperate pleas and Grayson's cold responses filled the room. The recordings painted a vivid picture of the preacher's brutality, leaving many in the audience visibly shaken. The contents of Grayson's hidden vault were also revealed. Photographs, letters, and personal belongings from multiple victims were displayed as evidence. The jury was shown the Polaroids in a carefully controlled manner, each image a haunting reminder of the lives Grayson had destroyed. The prosecution argued that these items were trophies, kept as sick mementos of his crimes. Testimonies from survivors added another layer of horror to the trial. Women who had once been part of Grayson's congregation recounted how he manipulated and controlled them under the guise of spiritual counseling. One by one, they described how he preyed on their vulnerabilities, isolating them from their families, and using fear to maintain his power. The accounts were heartbreaking, each story a testament to the depth of his depravity. Emily Parker became the star witness. Her testimony detailed her relationship with Grayson, the gradual erosion of her trust, and the night she witnessed Rachel Barnes's murder. She spoke of the fear that gripped her as she recorded the scene, the desperation that drove her to run barefoot through the dark Texas night, and the isolation she endured after coming forward. Emily's courage in facing Grayson in court was evident, and her words left a profound impact on the jury. Throughout the trial, Grayson maintained his composure. He sat at the defense table, flanked by his attorneys, his expression unreadable. His legal team argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that Emily's testimony was motivated by jealousy and revenge. They suggested that the items in the vault were planted, a conspiracy to tarnish a man of God. But the weight of the evidence was undeniable. September 24th, 2012. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in a mix of gasps and muffled cheers as the judge delivered the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the first time, Grayson's composure faltered. His faint smile disappeared, replaced by a cold, hard stare as he was led out of the courtroom. For Emily Parker and the other survivors, the verdict marked the end of a long and harrowing journey. It was a victory, but one that could never erase the scars left by Grayson's crimes. Faithstone Ministries, once a symbol of hope for so many, was left in ruins, its congregation scattered, and its legacy forever tainted. The trial revealed the horrifying extent of Grayson's manipulation and abuse, exposing the darkness that had lurked behind his righteous facade for over a decade. It was a chilling reminder of how power and charisma could be weaponized, and how even the most trusted figures could harbor unimaginable secrets. After a 6-week trial, Grayson is found guilty of multiple counts of murder, fraud, and abuse. He is sentenced to life without parole, his fall from grace shocking the nation. Emily Parker moves out of Canyon, starting a new life but haunted by the memories of her near-death experience. Faithstone Ministries dissolves, leaving its followers grappling with the betrayal of the man they once idolized. Grayson's case remains one of the darkest chapters in Texas history, a chilling reminder of the evil that can hide behind a mask of righteousness. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated on our daily true crime stories. If you thought this case was shocking, you won't believe a Catholic priest's affair with an illegal immigrant that took a bloody turn. Check it out and share your thoughts in the comments below.